2024 has been a weird year just a couple months in. Studios like Rocksteady seem hell-bent on trying to unalive themselves with a horrible live service game that has a story which disrespects its heroes. Ubisoft has opted to tell gamers they should get used to not owning their games, while also announcing the first ever quadruple A game. Wow! Ocean physics still aren't as good as 2018 Sea of Thieves, though. We can't forget about Stellar Blade coming out in April, where Shift Up used a real-life model as the, model for their main character to make her look hella attractive. Ooh la la. That, of course, caused a firestorm because, heaven forbid, we have an attractive woman dressed in an appealing way in current year. But that's a whole other discussion. The gaming controversy that piqued my interest is that surrounding Palworld. I'll be honest, I wasn't all too familiar with the game until a week or so after its early access launched. Actually, I'd only heard about it through the backlash and memes. If you're like me and weren't following its development, you probably heard of it through one of these lines. It's Pokemon with guns. It's a Pokemon ripoff. It's a Pokemon ripoff that's somehow better than Pokemon. Or, my personal favorite, it's a lazy cash grab by grifters using AI to steal Pokemon's ideas. Sorry, I couldn't keep a straight face while saying that one. I've heard/seen all the prior statements after the game's initial launch. Being a fan of the Pokemon franchise since my childhood, and having owned a copy from every wave of release, I was intrigued by Palworld, especially considering I couldn't bring myself to finish Scarlet and Violet. The first time in the history of the Pokemon franchise I didn't finish a mainline game. Hell, I only made it 2 gyms in before I had enough and gave up. While I definitely noticed the lack of innovation on Game Freak's part, and Pokemon's somewhat declining quality over the years, I had genuinely found enjoyment in their games. Legend Arceus was so enjoyable, it actually gave me hope we might see some innovation from the highest grossing media franchise in the world. But after the disappointment of BDSP, and the train wreck that is Scarlet and Violet, I had enough, and put the game down. I had no desire to return. Now, with my potential bias out of the way, I feel it's important we address what Palworld is, and describes itself to be, before tackling statements like the ones I parroted earlier. If we don't first present what it claims to be, how can we judge it on what it actually is and what people perceive of it? Unfortunately, Palworld's Steam description is very limited. It reads, Q. What kind of game is this? A. In this game you can peacefully live alongside mysterious creatures known as pals, or risk your life to drive off a ruthless poaching syndicate. Pals can be used to fight, or they can be made to work on farms or factories. You can even sell or eat them. It then goes on to explain some of the mechanics of the game, how multiplayer works. The trailer doesn't provide much in overtly telling us about the game either. However, we can glean some things about it, even though it's a non-verbal trailer. It shows off that the game appears to be open world, involves combat, and to some extent base building. It also shows off the pals and how you can interact with them. The website more or less provides the same information that the Steam page does, just in a different format with different wording. Is this intentional? Perhaps. But before we explore that, what kind of game is Palworld exactly? If challenged to do it in a brief sentence, I would describe the game as such. Palworld is an open-world creature collector game with heavy elements of base building and survival implemented. The less pretentious elevator pitch would go something like this. Palworld is a game that mixes together some of the best elements from other popular games, like Pokemon, Ark, and even Rust. The game is an open-world survival experience where you need to team up with mystical creatures called pals to build up your resources to advance your level and your technology. Pals are plentiful in the world and can be hostile until captured. The game can be played solo or with friends in a multiplayer mode. As for story, it may seem pretty lightweight, but if you look for it, you can find clues in the environment from NPCs and dropped logs to figure out the history of the island the game takes place on. After creating your character, you select a spawn point and go through a tutorial that gives you an understanding of the core mechanics of the game. Those core mechanics are capturing pals, pal management, base building, survival and crafting, and boss battles. Capturing pals is easy to explain. You find your pal and throw your Pal Sphere, after weakening them. Weakening can be done through your own attacks or via your own pal's attacks. Like I said, straightforward. Survival and crafting is also pretty straightforward. In the game, you have a hunger bar, like most other survival games. You need to eat, and if you don't, you'll die. You know, like real life. You also have to manage your temperature with the gauge at the bottom of the screen. Getting too hot or too cold will result in health loss. Temperature depends on the time of day and environment and can be managed by what gear you're wearing. Like most other survival games, you need to gather resources to craft equipment and structures, which leads into base building. This is where things get more complicated. You can build structures that allow you to craft higher level equipment that also requires level progress. Some structures allow for resource generation, and you can assign caught pals to your base, and they'll work on stations and do tasks for you. But beware, there are scripted events where NPCs can raid your base, meaning you will need to be prepared to defend it. Pal management goes hand in hand with base building. Pals you've captured have a status called San, which I assume is short for sanity, not entirely sure. If it goes down, they can become disobedient when doing tasks and cause problems at your base. The type of food you feed them and the amenities you build for them will affect how their san lowers and recovers. Finally, the world is littered with bosses. Stronger pals, which you can beat or catch for extra XP and special loot. But the main bosses are the Syndicate leaders, which are tougher than the older world bosses. They are characters that are paired with powerful pals. They serve as the main story progression, and the challenge is to eliminate them in 10 minutes. I'll be honest, that's a very quick look and overview of the game, but it does cover most of the important mechanics. What I believe gets most people up in arms are the similarities between this game and the mega popular franchise that is Pokemon. Obviously, some of the designs are clearly inspired, if we're being generous, or barely changed assets if we're being overly harsh. Some similar elements, like capturing creatures in orb-like objects and having them fight each other, are also present in the two franchises. But besides that, the similar-looking creatures and both games being in an anime art style, the similarities really end there. Palworld delves more into the survival and base building genre than anything Pokemon has ever produced. There is also more violence in Palworld. The guns being present in the game speaks to that, as do the ability to kill and eat pals. I don't see you killing or eating a Pikachu anywhere in Pokemon, eh? Not to mention the game's story elements focusing on the illegal pal trade. Palworld tries to make sure you know from the start pals are dangerous creatures. Pokemon never does that, with the exception of Legends Arceus. I believe that most of the controversy regarding Palworld comes from the die-hard Pokemon fans that erroneously believe that Game Freak and the Pokemon Company have exclusive rights to the creature collector genre and anything in a similar art style to Pokemon that even touches creatures. Yes, some of the Palworld designs are very similar. However, there is a variety of unique ones too. And the gameplay is, quite frankly, nothing like that of anything Pokemon has ever done. Fuel was only added to the fire when articles came up about the CEO of Pocket Pair being favorable towards AI. False rumors started to fly about the pals being created by AI, or AI being used to steal Pokemon's designs, but that has all been proven false. Like, really, do you think ChatGPT or Bing Chat could do this? Come on, guys. I've so far played 30 hours of Palworld, filled up 2/3 of the PAL deck, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it. Is this a masterpiece of a game? No, of course not. But I think it's fun. Palworld is clearly inspired by Pokemon. Of course it is. It's inarguable. But you can also see elements that draw from other games. The large-scaled creature combat from Ark, the open-world survival crafting from Name Your Favorite Survival Crafting Game. I've not played enough games with base management as a core feature, but I'm sure you can see inspirations from something there too if you've played games that have that kind of thing in it. Is Palworld truly original? No, of course not. But it's a far cry from blatantly stealing. Palworld clearly draws heavy inspiration from Pokemon, But it isn't a ripoff by any means. It's simply occupying a space for creature collectors for a more mature audience that Pokemon, for whatever reason, has decided not to. The truth of the matter is, Palworld and Originality is a tough nut to crack. We all have our lines we draw on when stealing turns into inspiration, and vice versa. I would argue in this case, it seems some people have taken their line just a little too far.